Before we formally start this exciting program of Future of Work, the BU Industry CXOs Connect, the much needed one and the first ever in the history of Bahria University, Pakistan, I would like to thank you, especially our guests from industry, from Lahore, from Islamabad and the development sector, for joining us in this Bahria University's 20th anniversary celebrations and sparing valuable time out of your very busy schedule. Especially would like to acknowledge my valued guest speakers, panelists who are friends and associates and members of a prestigious corporate Pakistan group. I'm a part of that group, especially Mr. Ghazanfar Ali, Mr. Mudassar Akil, Mr. Sajid Aslam, Ms. Fatma Asad Said, Ms. Puresh Chaudhary, Mr. Mazhar Hussain, Mr. Saqib Ahmed, and Mr. Taimur Abbasi, the son of the Honorable Chief of Naval Staff. And I want to acknowledge valuable contribution of founder of our corporate Pakistan group, Mr. Muhammad Asfar Hassan, my brother, my friend, for his kind support. And thank you, my respectable seniors, Mr. Amir Ibrahim, Mr. Langovan, and Mr. Hassan Daud for your valuable time. My dear colleagues, faculty members and students of Islamabad, Lahore and Karachi campus, guys, don't miss this golden opportunity to learn from vision of these exemplary industry leaders. I expect that all the participants would actively participate in this 3-hour exciting program designed just for you, rather just for us, the BU and the Industry Connect, and would be having 2 very important dialogue sessions and 3 keynotes on future of work. Thank you.
It will also enable our academic community to conduct gap analysis of our curricula to pave way for a demand-driven curriculum, which can play a facilitative role in equipping our students with the required skill set. Ladies and gentlemen, advancements in technologies, globalization, and demographic changes are drastically changing the work requirement, are being modified, and in some cases are becoming obsolete. Many new avenues such as artificial intelligence, big data, data analytics, etc. are emerging as new fields. Requirements of soft skills that predominantly differentiate computers from the human beings are becoming more in demand. In the context of Pakistan, CPEC and development of Gwadar port will be making many new changes, and there will be emerging fields such as supply chain and logistics and maritime sciences. So these will be new avenues where we will have to focus. Such changes are completely transforming the landscape of work environment. We therefore have responsibility towards educating our academia and students about these changes so as to prepare them for the challenges ahead. Ladies and gentlemen, the skill set of our graduating students has to be compatible with the demands of the job market and industry. When we look at the educational models of the Western and advanced countries, we clearly see a framework that is enabling academia and industry to spend more time with each other, whether through industry placements, innovation or incubation centers, science parks, or industry projects and research. This consequently is enabling their students to be well informed of the future trends in job market. This is something which is lacking in our country. We are therefore trying to bridge the gap between academia and industry through network sessions such as this one. It is part of our strategic plan to effectively engage with industry to maximize the impact of our excellence in education and research. This seminar is one aspect of our strategy towards the achievement of this goal. We are simultaneously striving to bring in a system that integrates our product with industry requirements. We have established an innovation center with the same vision to provide our students and faculty a forum where they can directly engage with their industry and work out possible solutions relevant to our society. Establishment of Maritime Science and Technology Park, which is also in the pipeline, will further complement this effort. My objective is to ensure that our university follows a more outward approach in its academic and research work, while keeping in mind the requirements of the society. In the end, I would like to thank all our distinguished guests for joining us in this noble cause of educating the youth of our nation. Our collective goal is to ensure that our student body is guided towards the right direction, which makes them relevant to the future job market. I would like to appreciate the efforts of our Marketing Directorate for arranging this seminar in coordination with Islamabad campus. I wish you all a very productive afternoon session. Best of luck. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Please take your seat. Now, a question that most of you would be thinking of is that why this event has been arranged. And to answer that, I'd like to say that this summit is an initiative to bridge linkages with the industry, to learn and discuss future trends and requirements of the job market. Secondly, to provide a sound understanding to the participants about the skill set and mindset required to come up to the expectations of leading employers of Pakistan. Also, it will provide exposure to our respected faculty and students on real corporate world's future of work trends, changes, challenges, and business opportunities. And lastly, we are here to do the gap analysis for industry demand-driven curriculum. So with that, our first keynote speaker is Ms. Paresh Chaudhary, Member Network of Global Future Council's World Economic Forum. She's featured as the world's top female futurist and founder of the Agahi NGO. Ms. Chaudhary, a Harvard University, Singularity University alumni, is withholder of a professional master's degree in international negotiation and policy making from a prestigious university at Geneva. She has been recognized as a global shaper by the World Economic Forum. It gives me immense pleasure to invite on stage with a huge round of applause, Ms. Paresh Chaudhary. Ma'am, please can we have you on stage?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much. That was the most elaborate introduction I've ever had, and it's almost frightening because sitting amongst distinguished engineers, mechanical and both weapons and all those things, one begin to imagine and shrink to his or her own size, really what one has accomplished so far. And with that, I understand the title is Future of Work, and while all of you are sitting here, you come from different backgrounds. So as many people as actually are sitting here, these are the kind of futures that I see. So you may be going into one particular department and it could be an administration, but imagine if there are 20 of you in that administration department, you come from 20 different futures. So as a foresight practitioner, how do we look at work is what defines the kind of frame and the reference that we take in order to figure out what are the trends and directions that are shaping up. We're sitting today in Ibn Khaldun's auditorium, named after him. A very famous historian, looks at the growth and decline of empires. And while he's a very famous historian, much of our foresight practice also comes from his famous literature, Muqaddimah. So when we're looking at how do we design our way of thinking, we're actually studying the historians, especially with the Arab descent, how they shape or how they have configured our way of life or our way of thinking. But traditionally, if you were to think about the past, you can use this as a template. So when we were an agrarian, we're still an agrarian society, time is cyclical, which means we're going to waste for our harvest. We're going to wait for actually when are we going to grow wheat, when are we going to grow rice, and that becomes our way of life. So the wealth primarily is based on land. The wars which have actually been fought is based on land and based on the resource which we call the agriculture. You move further down, and if you take information as one of the ages, and you look at what is the product that we're doing or product that we're selling then, you see information and service becomes the product. But who consolidates that power, that stores the information, that shares that service, is your modern day corporations that we see, that I think the Rector Saab has pointed out is perhaps our marketplace where we want to send the young people, as you go out of these rooms, as you move out of these universities, where will you be placed? The place of work, therefore, becomes office. Some of you have woke up this morning. Ma'am, you must have arrived at 9 in the morning. So she has had to come to work, which is in a particular office, at 9 in the morning. But then there is an entire community who does not really need to move away from his or her laptop. And in this case, if you look at the Jazz CEO, he can work off his phone, and that is completely fine. So he brought his work with him, which is okay. Because the nature of work is changing so fast, our behaviors and habits are changing so fast, we need to understand if we need to make people employable in the next 10 years, what are the decisions and what are the choices that we need to make? So although Amir Saab's time is flexible and he can bring this time anywhere, I let my phone be in the bag so I wouldn't switch in and off between the presentation. But if you look at how do we need to think about the future, you would understand much of the crisis and the conflict we see around us are primarily based on identity. मेरा बाप ये करता है, मेरी माँ ये कहती है, मैं खुद ये हूँ, मैं ये बनना चाहता हूँ, मुझे ये society बनने ये नहीं देती. So when you look at all these concepts and when you look at KGPTA ने social media का एक नया वो regulation निकाले, so why are all these things happening? Not to say who's right and wrong, what is it that is changing that we are not looking at? That's when you try and understand what is this framework actually telling you. So we're not talking about what technologies, we're talking about when would the power rest with the individual. So when the power comes to the individual, how important are the identities? And this is where your rector pointed out very rightly, this is where artificial intelligence, big data analytics, these are where all these technologies and all these know-how come into existence. But then again, in that time frame, you don't have to come at 9 in the morning. You kind of invent as and when you want to do what you want to do, as you want to do it, in your own time. And that's where the power of individual comes in. Are there any neuroscientists in the room? Since we don't have neuroscientists, here's one definition which I find quite interesting. So identity lies not in our genes, but in the connections between our brain cells. If identity lies not in our genes, but in the connections between our brain cells, ever wondered how many brain cells are there? So some scientists say there are almost 100 billion. Some scientists say there are 86 billion. So the discussion is still on among the brain scientists exactly how many neurons do you have. But exactly how many trillions of synaptic connections does it take to develop a thought? So this is where science is actually moving, and brain science therefore becomes a very important subject in our domain as to where are these sciences moving and how will technology become more conscious. But while doing that, we take you forward into the next 80 years. We're 11 billion people. So when we're approximated at 11 billion people, imagine what is the frame that we're going to use at that point. I use, as an alumni of SU, I use singularity as one of the frame. So a point in time where you cannot be defined. Things that we saw, I mean, World Bank does a phenomenal job in terms of defining, getting data together, and developing some sort of understanding of where the data is moving. But imagine a time where you don't know what your civilization in the next 80 years would look like if we get a full understanding of how the brain works, how machines are going to learn, and what are they going to produce that humans are incapable of producing. One of which, one of the pro-rectors and I was discussing, like, how do you optimize and how do you bring efficiency? How do you create will in people? How do you do that? How do you do that when most of us in this room are stuck in those boxes? This is a very dear friend, Shazad Nawaz, and he developed further on Maslow hierarchies of need, and he said, okay, if we were to look at the future scenarios work, Piyush, that you're doing, let's just put two more boxes at the top. So those two more boxes transcend from self to selflessness. But how is that relevant for Pakistan? Today, if we are approximately 220 million people, by the year 2100, we'd be almost 403 million people, give or take. Now, these are just linear projections. These are just projections from what the Bureau of Statistics, what World Bank, what Party International Futures sort of tells us. This is not something that we have done ourselves. This is not the homework that we've done. This is something that is actually handed over to us. We know, how many of you are aware of Fourth Industrial Revolution? Show of hands. So we say, like most of you actually know what Fourth Industrial Revolution is. How many of you actually have a smartphone device? Which means you can connect to the internet as and when you want. Show of hands. So are we saying, sir, aap logon ke paas, kisi ke paas bhi nahi, aapke paas hai? Okay, so all of us have a smartphone device which is connected to the internet and you can connect at any given point in time. Is that correct? Have you guys looked at your phone while I have been talking? Now, this is the beauty. People are willing to be honest about what they have done. Now, when you are in an environment where people are honest about what they are doing, then you sort of understand it is not so much so an uncharted territory. Things are not so uncertain. There are things that make us certain. World Bank is one of the institutions that make things certain for us, helps us understand where things are going. So many different, like for instance, the World Economic Forum, my friend who had introduced me earlier, they're trying to make sense of things, how things are moving, where things are going. Have you realized, so far I have not spoken about work nor technology. But as we progress, the Fourth Industrial Revolution is basically you becoming your phone and your phone becoming you. Neither knows which is what. This is the cyber-physical system. But what is driving the cyber-physical system? Sorry. You don't have, not to take it. Sorry. So what drives the Fourth Industrial Revolution is the AI. AI is no longer the elephant in the room. We have an entire presidential program on AI. So it means it has been embraced and it has been adopted at the highest level. But how many types of AI are there? Is anyone aware of the types of AI that is being discussed? Do you think machine learning is AI or is just a system? Okay, let me just break it down. There are three calibers. One caliber is the narrow caliber, which basically means the way your camera operates. It knows and it understands the function and the task that it needs to operate. The second one is the general caliber. So the general caliber basically is your machine as smart as you are. So your machine as smart as you are. So imagine how much data does the machine has on you to understand what your identity is, to understand what your next moves will be. And that's where machine learning and all these other technologies come in. But then there is the third type. And this is how my friend perfectly describes the third type, beyond what Nick Bostrom, who's a famous neuroscientist, but beyond what Nick Bostrom says, that what is a super intelligence? Now, if sitting in this room, how many of you have set goals for yourself and show of hand? जिंदगी में जो करना है खुद ने गोल किया बनाया है. कितने लोगों के पेरेंट्स ने गोल बनाया है? It's okay. So goal setting, जब उसकी बात आती है, that's where we try and sort of understand what does super intelligence mean. So fourth industrial revolution, as much as we'd like to believe, is not really a buzzword. It basically means optimization, efficiency, how can I drive more value from the current machines and the system that we have, that we are capable of doing because of there is a lack of will. If there is a lack of will and there is no sense of learning new skills, therefore, how will we be replaced? By the way, this year is going to be the first International Congress for the Governance of AI. It's going to be held this year in Prague. So if those of you interested, please let me know, and I'll hook you up with a team that are actually arranging this. Then begs the question, Piyush Chaudhary, you may be standing here, but exactly what have you done, really? I mean, you've been and blabbing about like the AI and the fourth industrial revolution and all these organizations that you've gone to and you've addressed. So what is it actually that the work situation is going to look like? And for those of my friends at the back who cannot really tell, there are three scenarios in particular. Now, all these three scenarios, if you were to imagine today, you're kind of living out these three scenarios. So the scenario number one that my team and I had produced is like, it's complicated, it's a bit of a mixed bag. What does this mean? It means that business as usual, trend projection of increasing acceleration of change. There is both stupidity and intelligence in decision making. So that's that one trend. Then there is irregular adoption of technology, especially advanced technology. You're adopting technology, but you don't know how you're going to cater for huge unemployment. If you're sitting in this room, I was talking to actually a friend of mine this morning in a meeting who's working on a Karachi Futures platform. And we were discussing about big data and all these things, and I asked him a very simple question while preparing for this presentation. I said, Hisham, you're the guy who's employed. How many friends, same age as you, are unemployed? He counted, there were 5 of them. So he knew 5 people who were unemployed, same age, 25-year, 26-year-olds. So I was like, Hisham, from Malir Kent, you go all the way to your work on Chandigarh Road, takes you almost an hour to get to Chandigarh Road. So that's 1 hour to work and another hour back home. So that's 8 hours at work, roughly give or take. So 12 hours of your life is pretty much defined, taking into consideration at the time you wake up for work also. I was like, now try and sort of consider your 5 friends. While your 12 hours have been very uniquely defined, are the 12 hours for those 5 of your friends are well defined. So what are your 24-year-old, 26-year-old during your work hours, what are they going to be doing if they're unemployed? Are they going to be on their phones? Are they going to be looking up Netflix? What is it that they're doing? So in our line of work, it is important to understand what is happening with those 24 to 26-year-olds with the time that is not consumed in any employable activity. But when you see that, there is a third scenario also, which is political and economic turmoil, which is like there is immense despair. So when we talk about there is immense despair, what has happened in this scenario in 2050? What has happened is that the governments did not anticipate the impacts of artificial general intelligence. This is where smart machines replace smart people because they're more efficient and more optimized, and you don't have to pay any sort of insurance. Social polarization and political gridlock in many forms have grown. The global order has deteriorated into a combination of nation states, mega corporation, local militias, terrorism, and organized. But what is the scenario that my dear friend Shahzad Nawaz had developed the whole hierarchy for, is if humans were free, the self-actualization economy. What does this mean? Governments did anticipate the impacts of artificial general intelligence, conducted extensive long-range studies, and promoted self-employment, which you call entrepreneurship. How many people are artists in the room? Show of hand. So artists could be anything. You can play music and you can still be considered artist. You can be a painter, you can be a calligrapher. So artists are very important. If you understand if singularity is important, then you would understand creativity is important. You'd also understand that imagination is equally important. But why are all these things important? There are 100 billion neurons. What do we do with 100 billion neurons when Hisham's 5 friends are unemployed, and what do they do with this 12 hours? So how did we go on about? So we studied with almost 30 different countries. We had national workshops. 100 actions were assessed. So imagine one of the action point, the purpose of, we are redefining the purpose of education with these countries. What is the purpose of education? It's not about educating, it's about improving intelligence and intelligences. If the purpose of education is not about improving intelligence, then you're actually not preparing the next generation for what is lying ahead in the 20, 25 years. But as we do that, there is significant science about memories and imagination. How do you recall the path connected to what kind of future outcomes you're looking for? But as we're doing that and new technologies are emerging, we know that our understanding of how we sense our environment is also changing. What does that look like? This is the recent publication that we did, the Future of Possibilities, launched last year. We did a basic comparison of where Pakistan, so on the State of Future Index, where Pakistan was moving in 2027 and where Pakistan is moving in 2029 if significant developments were to occur. So let's just say these are the list of developments. This is the variable we picked up. It's the internet. The most plausible is like we get almost up to like 50% of the entire population on the internet, but this is the sort of trend where we have not figured out any of the developments. So if any development were to occur, what will be the impact on this trend? We do that in the next phase, and we realize that when we did that back in 2019, we realized that there is the best value, which is the blue dot, and then there is the worst value, which is closer to your baseline. So the best value is 85% of your entire population needs to be connected with the internet. So with this, let me say, each one of you can actually generate and potentially create the future you want, and some of you have already done this while sitting here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for those interesting insights. And now I'd like to call on stage Honorable Director Bahria University to present souvenir to ma'am Paresh Chaudhary. Now, before moving to our next keynote speaker, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Mr. Khurram Rahat, who is a group member of Corporate Pakistan. Thank you so much, sir, for coming here. With that, our next keynote speaker of this session is Mr. Amir Ibrahim, Chief Executive Officer, Jazz. He has over 2 decades of international leadership experiences across multiple industries, including Jazz, Telenor, Jaguar, and Ford Motor Company at the US, UK, UAE, Switzerland, Thailand, and Pakistan. So, with a huge round of applause, please welcome on stage Mr. Amir Ibrahim.
Thank you, Puresh. Before we get started, I've got a few slides. I was one of the guilty people who was on the smartphone, but I was trying to get some near real-time information about how many talented individuals do we hire from Bahria every year. So I got the number. We hired about 50 people from Bahria universities in the last 3 years, right? and the person that I was getting this information from, so I just picked it up, near real time, is also a graduate from Bahria. He did his MBA from here in 2015. Very smart individual, who's recently been promoted. I have a lot of respect for that. And as a consequence, I have a lot of respect from the talent that you guys are generating over here. So please give yourselves a big round of applause. Okay, I have about 20 minutes. We've started talking about, we will get to that. I have to do a customary, like who are we, et cetera, so please bear with me for a minute. Although I hope everybody's familiar with Jazz. We used to be called Mobilink till about 3 years ago, one of the largest corporates in Pakistan in terms of revenue. Every third Pakistani is directly or indirectly a customer. Perhaps what is important to highlight over here is that over our 25-year journey, we also had to go through these winds of change. So it's not just the future of work, it's also the future of workplace, and also how industries evolve. So we used to be a telecom company, building towers and selling SIMs. Today we are more of an internet company because almost 97% of all internet in Pakistan happens through mobile or mobile phones. So we are now moving towards, as you hear about 3G and 4G and 5G, all of the internet, whether it's through smartphones, and predominantly in Pakistan, we use the small screen for internet. So all of the information flow is coming through this. Our next ambition is to be actually the largest bank in Pakistan. So we have to pivot yet again, right? There's a massive opportunity in Pakistan in terms of financial inclusion. So what Jazz is now trying to do through Jazz Cash is spearhead the fintech initiative of ours. So over these 25 years, I'm just highlighting that we too as a company, if we were to only rely on selling phones and SIMs, we would not be here where we are. And our next journey after fintech, which we have already started talking about and thinking about, is data. Not data as in the data that you use to connect to internet, but the richness of the data that relies on understanding human behavior and customer behavior. So that's how we as a company are evolving. It might be pertinent, since some of you will be graduating very soon, or you must be thinking about your future organizations. I think one of the trends that we're now beginning to see is that they're not always going to be those traditional companies. There are new companies that are arriving on the horizon. Some of them very recently, some of them the names you would be familiar with, but they normally operate again on the internet space. You look at the demographic, or you look at some of the stats over here on the bottom left. 45 million people using WhatsApp. What does that mean? I will come to that in a second. Jazz has started offering its customer services through WhatsApp. It creates a new channel. What does that do for us? What does that mean for us? What does that mean for some of the people over here in this room? Probably a job elimination of somebody who's standing behind a counter. A job elimination of somebody who is on a call center picking up calls. Because now the customer doesn't really want to be bothered walking to a certain location, getting his or her problem addressed. They can get their problem addressed almost instantaneously. So we started using WhatsApp as a channel. So just giving a scale of ideas and a scale of the disruption that is happening. Again, massive, not just here in Pakistan, perhaps we are more of laggards over here, but around the world much more rapidly. Your workforce may not necessarily be with a well-established company, although we at Jazz will try to keep on changing our workforce and our working environment so that we can attract the best talent that exists over here. But we will also fail because there's going to be competition. And what I want to highlight is that competition is going to be non-traditional. This is what we call over-the-top players, internet companies, as we go. And like you briefly alluded to the fourth industrial revolution, where it's not computing, it's artificial intelligence. That is disrupting a lot of businesses. So the workforce of today, and certainly the workforce of tomorrow, are going to be operating and working for companies which have a very different culture from even what I think is a very progressive culture at Jazz. Those companies will be very, very different. But there is hope. The hope is not that what you have learned, and I learned this thing when I was doing my MBA. One of my professors asked me, he said, the right question is not how many languages do you speak. The right question is how many languages are you capable of learning. So if you, over these last 4 years or however long you have spent over here, have only learned a subject, then that subject may become outdated. It will get replaced. But if what you have done over here has honed your ability to learn, that faculty and that competence will never get out of date. So focus on this thing. It's not what you learned, it's the art of learning. And if you are a learner, you will keep on improvising. And this is what we see in our organization also, that the people who have succeeded or who have proceeded or progressed in our organization over a longer period of time are the ones who have actually been able to reinvent themselves. Yes, I think some of you may have already been familiar with this thing. Our jobs, the traditional jobs as we know them, are under threat, primarily because of robotic process automation, redundant words, repetitive words, non-intelligent work. A computer can do better. The computer can also learn how to do it better, which is what machine learning is. And that was a good question whether machine learning is AI. I think it's probably a subset of AI. But definitely a lot of these things, the jobs that we know today, are under threat. And again, we can get worried, or we can say, I still know how to learn things and therefore I will be safe, right? An important statistic to give is that earlier, in the mid-19th century in the US, about 90% of the US workforce was involved in agriculture. Today it is less than 2%. Yet agriculture hasn't disappeared. Quite on the contrary, the agricultural produced has increased maybe more than 10 times. So over these years, a whole industry has learned to do something else, or generations subsequently that were employed in agriculture have learned to do something else, right? That is the reskilling that we should also be prepared for. Likewise, mining in the 60s in the US. All these jobs, eventually through automation, whether it was the Industrial Revolution or the computing revolution of 1960s or the internet revolution of the 2000s, they will disrupt things. But that doesn't mean that livelihood will completely disappear. We just have to learn how to do different things. And if we can continuously learn as a society, as people, as individuals, then we have a safe future. Certainly, a lot of our current faculties will get challenged by the computer, which can learn as well as we do. Some of the softer skills, the creative skills, perhaps, or the skills that require empathy or physical touch, perhaps will last longer. Things which are more at risk are going to be, with all due respect, and I don't want to scare you off, but accounting, even computing to a certain extent, legal, paralegal, all of these things are more at risk because there's going to be a wealth of information and great processing power that will basically allow the computer to be able to do the job that humans do. Let me share one or two examples. We briefly, directly or indirectly, talked about this thing. I will give you one example from Jazz. When I arrived as a chief commercial officer, having some problems over here. Right. When I arrived over here 4 years ago, we had about 3,000 people in our call center taking about 180,000 calls a day, right? We had about 40 million customers. Today we have 60 million customers. We take 110,000 calls. But what we are doing is we are moving people to self-care. I gave the example of WhatsApp. We were asked the question about how many people have smartphones. We want customers to solve their own problems. So the challenge before us was, how do we go and speak to all these employees who exist in our call centers? And that's a very difficult conversation. And more and more employers get it wrong because they hide behind dishonest reasons and they hide behind digitalization or cost cutting. But if you have an honest dialogue with your workforce, you can actually say that the work and the job is actually going to change. We still have a year, either upskill or go and work in an environment where this particular job will be a revenue generating thing. What we did over there at Jazz was we challenged ourselves, why do customers actually call us? They call us because our prices are complicated, our tariffs are complicated, or we have created a problem for them to call us. When you go to the root cause analysis, you start solving it. Then you think about, why would somebody actually want to call you? This is a painful process. So we had to create an environment where they can actually solve their problems. So I'm just giving one of the examples because earlier on, at least in the early 2000s, there was a boom for call centers in Pakistan and Philippines and India because a lot of companies around the world, they were doing labor arbitrage. It is more expensive for somebody to pick up a phone in the US than it is in India or Pakistan. So the call gets routed over here. That existed for about 10 years, the call center business or the business processing, this business process outsourcing industries in Pakistan or Asia where there was labor arbitrage. Even within 10 years, that industry is now getting disrupted because customers do not have the time to call or to walk into a center. So this is an example from our side where we actually had to disrupt ourselves and have those painful discussions with our employees. So today we have none of the call center employees working directly for us. They work for call centers where they're revenue agents rather than cost centers. But at the same time, they have ongoing livelihood. Many of them have evolved to learn other skills which are more important for their sustained jobs at Jazz. So again, just wanted to highlight that these kind of evolutionary pressures will always exist, not only as a consequence of cost cutting, but as an evolution of technology. We also have to recognize, and most of you who are about to graduate very soon will be looking at employment opportunities. We also have to recognize that entrepreneurship is also a career. We have to recognize, quite honestly, in Pakistan, there is less of that. We have to start building small and medium enterprises. We have to take advantage of the internet. And for that, Jazz, along with the government of Pakistan, has launched a National Incubation Center. What we're doing over here is bringing smart individuals with great ideas and giving them the opportunity in a physical location where with real data and real-time mentoring and a little bit of financial and computing help, we're actually allowing them to build their ideas. Now, whether they become unicorns or not, that's not the point. The point, again, which I wanted to highlight, especially to the audience over here, is that your future path may not necessarily be working for a big multinational company. And you should be open to the idea, if you have passion, if you have an idea, to not feel afraid and to actually pursue that thing. Internet, quite honestly, is a great enabler. It was a great equalizer. And in this day and age, anybody has as bright a future as anybody else in the world, just through the power of internet. So with that, I would just like to end my little talk. It has been wonderful sharing some of our experiences. The future is uncertain, but I can tell you, if you look at it with the right perspective, the future is very bright. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative talk. With that, I would like to request Honorable Rector Bahria University to please come up on stage and present souvenir to Mr. Amir Ibrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, our next and last keynote speaker of the session is Mr. Pachamuthu Ilangovan, Country Director of the World Bank, South Asia region. Mr. Ilangovan has an extensive intercontinental experience in managerial, operational, and technical positions in Afghanistan, US, Laos, and Thailand. His 2-decade career span includes delivering operations in natural resources, water, energy, urban sectors, and environment. It gives me immense pride to call on stage Mr. Ilangovan for his speech. Please, sir.
Vice Chancellor, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here to talk about the future of work. The speakers before me rightfully articulated the power of technology and what it can do to create jobs. And I agree with all of them. But at the same time, there are many who are going to be left behind because they may not be able to acquire that capability, and what happens to them. And this is what, as much as my good friend Amir says, technology is a great equalizer, it could also be a great divider. And it's imperative that every country, every society, every economy puts in place measures actually to ensure technology is inclusive and doesn't promote inequality. And that would be the gist of my comments this afternoon. Sometimes my views might be sobering, but I must start by saying I'm an eternal optimist. I worked in some of the more challenging environments in the world, and I always believe every country chooses its destination. And in Pakistan, I remain very optimistic. This country is going to be having a very bright future going forward. Having said this, Amir and put forward that 2/3 of the population are under the age of 30. Many of you are here. Think of a day, 27 years from now, when this young country will celebrate its first century as a nation. And at that time, everybody would like to reflect. Many of you who are young will be in your 40s. Somebody like me might be close to the 90s. But the fact is, we all will look back and want to celebrate a nation that has made it big in this part of the world as well as globally. So in preparation for that, the World Bank, many of us only look at us as a financing institution. As you may not know, we also are a large data organization. We produce a lot of research works, a lot of analytical firepower we bring to our work in many countries as well as globally. So last year, over a period of couple of years, working with a number of academics in Pakistan and global researchers, we looked at what kind of a country Pakistan will be in 2047. That's when you turn 100 years. And in doing so, we looked at the last 70 years. We also looked at many other countries that have transformed themselves from being poor to what I would call today more prosperous countries, China, Korea, Vietnam, and so on. The list goes. And what it took them to get where they are today, and what would it take Pakistan to get to a level where it can be as well prosperous. We certainly see two pathways for Pakistan. A very prosperous one that by 2042 or so on, that's 22 years from now, you could be a $2 trillion economy. You're around $320 billion today. So you're looking at 6 to 6.5 times bigger in terms of the size of the economy, and which would also mean the per capita incomes would rise from what they are today to from $1,400 to about $6,000. But there's an important catch. And I think, Paresh, you said the population will hit 400 million by 2100. I think it might hit 50 years before that. Okay, so you'll double your size of population in the next 27 to 30 years. Now, the first question is, can Pakistan actually carry a population of 400 million? And the answer is one of no. Okay, you are at almost 210 million, and you can already see the challenges of trying to maintain such a large population in Pakistan, and you could see it across, whether it's on socioeconomic achievements, on poverty numbers, on provision of services. Everywhere the challenge, the gap is continuing to increase. And if you look back and see what Pakistan needs to do in terms of sort of start moderating its population growth, we looked at the numbers and said somewhere in the ballpark of 300 to 320 million is what we think is a size by 2047. You need to sort of be able to sustain it. And here you're looking at population numbers today are growing at 2.4%. Fertility rates are around 3.7%, which is among the highest in the world. Now let's take, for example, Bangladesh put in place population measures include family planning, brought more girls got girls to finish school, more women into the labor force. If Pakistan had pursued such policies over the last 30, 40 years, you would have 40 million fewer people. So this is the kind of way you need to look into the 2047 future. So that $2 trillion economy is possible. For that to happen, we looked at a number of other factors. One is investments in Pakistan. Now, all the great technology solutions that are before us, which Amir kind of put forward, they're all possible, but somebody needs to invest. And Jazz cannot be the only big company, or Telenor the only other company investing big in Pakistan. At 10% of private investment to GDP, you are half of rest of the region. And to create over 1 million jobs a year, that's what is needed because of the expanding population, that many jobs need to be created. You cannot do it just by relying that the government will invest and government will create jobs. I have met with a lot of young people across the country in my 4+ years I engage with a lot of technology startups. Very interesting. I'm inspired by them. But I also talk to people when I ask them, where do you like to get a job? The answer would be government. Government has to provide jobs. I think this is sort of a mindset issue that needs to rapidly change. I'm glad to see private companies now becoming a much more attractive employer. So I think the direction should be more investments need to come into Pakistan. More investments need to happen where not only foreign direct investment coming from countries or diaspora Pakistanis who want to invest here, but also domestic investments need to happen. If you start boosting investments, immediately you're going to see not only higher growth rates, more jobs being created. Then let's move to jobs, and that's precise the title. And as I said, more than 1 million jobs need to be created. But what kind of jobs is the most important question. And today when you look back, roughly numbers around 3 to 3.5 million people are unemployed. I don't have the exact statistics. This is based on some older numbers. And because of the large informality in Pakistan, it's often difficult to put down a number as what's the unemployment numbers. But I can tell you world over, the crying call is jobs, jobs, and jobs. Everybody is pushing for and wanting jobs. So let's look at some of the more health and education indicators, and which is again very sobering. Recently we did something called the learning poverty, looked at across the world, what's the learning poverty, how much are kids learning. So we came up with this number like, say, if you are a 10-year-old or less, how much can you read and write? Okay. And it is shocking that in Pakistan, 75% of the kids of the age of 10 or below cannot read or write. Now this is something that needs to be fixed urgently if you want to get to that digital future. Because as I said at the beginning, technology can be an equalizer as well as a divider. If you do not provide them with the right capabilities to learn, then what you're going to see is you're not going to be able to create the human capital of the future that actually can take advantage of the technology opportunities before you. So continue to focus on your education, primary, secondary, tertiary. You cannot afford to sort of say, we all are dreaming of a technology future and then find that you're not actually providing enough learning opportunities for children. So many kids go to school, but do they learn? And this is a problem throughout the world, not only in Pakistan. That's why I feel technology here can be a great way through which education can be enhanced through online as well as tablet as well as digital learning. And it's important that Pakistan closes the gap on that. Second, on the preparing your youth for the future. Pakistan has had a challenging problem, one, stunting. This is childhood stunting of 2 years and below. It has some of the highest, some very high numbers, 39 to 44%. And if you are stunted as a baby, as a 2-year-old, then basically what you're saying is your brain development is such that you don't have what is called the best of cognitive skills, which you actually need if you want to be able to master the computers or the digital capability. So it's important that one starts focusing a lot on childhood nutrition, and this begins straight from the time pregnancy happens to the first 1,000 days of a kid. And if you can start working towards that, you're basically going to reverse a trend that has been there in this country for 50 years. The third aspect is where Pakistan can do a lot more, is to put more women, more girls to finish school, and increase the number of women in the labor force. If you look at there is a growing sort of gap between boys and girls in schools, especially in secondary schools. How do you close it? How do you keep girls in schools? I think this is extraordinarily important. It also helps towards helping them to build skills, as well as in the medium to longer term towards moderating of population numbers. And one of the things we see in the female labor force participation at 26%, when you compare with the more advanced economies, which have all kind of closing that gap faster. Pakistan's currently male part of the labor force participation is 81%, female is 26%, so you can look at the gap is around 55%. That gap needs to be reduced. And today, if you look at, agriculture is your 1/5 of your economy, and it employs nearly half of the labor in this country. But you can now see a trend where men are moving towards construction and service sector, and women are moving into the agriculture field, so which is good. But I think what is needed is to impart them with skills. So whether they are in the fields, whether they're doing livestock, whether they're doing fruits and vegetables, they have the right capability and skills to be able to kind of get more productivity, and they can also earn more wages, which is also good for the consumption that needs to happen in the rural areas for the economy to grow. So what I was trying to highlight is that while the future of work is important from digital and other means, you also need to keep your eye on other forms of jobs that still are required. And technology is not going to be able to find all your solutions. So in an affordable fashion, it can help you leapfrog, but let's not forget, like fixing a light bulb, picking up the garbage from the streets, you would still need that work to happen, that labor to happen. But I don't know whether the machines can come and take care of all of them at a cost that everybody can afford. Whereas, in this country where tax collection is so low, where very few people want to pay property taxes, so you can't expect to see a technology revolution happening in the service industry very fast. So my concluding thoughts is, Pakistan has a bright future. You can get to the $2 trillion economy. Need to fix some of your underlying fundamentals. Use technology smartly in a way to leapfrog so that it becomes an equalizer and not a divider. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir, for enlightening our audience with your knowledge. Now, I'd like to request Honorable Rector Bahria University to please come up on stage and present souvenir to Mr. Langovan. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our first session, Future of Work. And before getting started with the second session, I would like to thank each one of you for being here with us to witness this amazing summit together. I would also like to thank our participants from Bahria University, Lahore campus and Karachi campus for being here with us.